I made it abundantly clear on the channel that the Resident Evil franchise is my favorite video game franchise of all time. The Resident Evil 9's coming out, and I've also made it abundantly clear I'm pretty worried about that game based on the trailer for a myriad of reasons. And one of the things I've been telling people for ages is that the remakes 2, 3, and 4 do not hold a candle to the original, and I get blasted for it. But then I was on X the other day. I was on X, and I came across this video right here. The original Resident Evil games are better, and let me tell you, it's gonna be nice to have my, just to feel validated, to have my thoughts affirmed. So, yeah, welcome back to Words Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idol, and we're gonna go through this before we do hit that subscribe button. I'm a nerdy news channel. I cover nerdy news nearly every day. While this isn't particularly news, I am curious what this YouTuber has to say about the original Resident Evil games. Let's see, this is done by, this is just called Studio. And it's a 5-day-old video, 6 days by the time you're seeing this. So yeah, let's just get into this, let's break it down, see the arguments they make for why the original games are better, which I do agree with, and we'll go from there. This video contains scenes of very lazy B-roll. Alright, well done. Okay, first of all, I do want to say, you can tell this is recorded on a PC though. Like, this is very obviously like the GOG cuts. This is far too HD for these classic PS1 games, but that's okay. That's how I play them too nowadays. Look at Nemesis, how sick he looks.
The original Resident Evil games are great. They're awesome. And I'm of course talking about the first 3 on the PS1, you know, the ones that came out in the 90s, the last generation before airplanes were scary. Well, Alright,
at the gate I can tell this dude gonna be like, before airplanes were scary. If that was a 9/11 reference, that was good. But I will say, the Resident Evil 1 remake that came out in 2002 is the exception to the rule. First of all, that is the gold standard for remakes in general. When it comes to video game remakes, Resident Evil 1 remake, often just called R, E, remake, is the gold standard. That is better than the original on the PS1. And maybe if he talks about it, we'll get into why. But yeah, I want to just say that is the exception to the rule.
Remakes rule in their own right. They sort of don't hold a candle to the originals. They lack vision somehow in terms of expanding upon the scope of their PS1 counterparts. I'm more so talking about the RE2 and 3 remake if you hadn't guessed, since the RE1 remake is...
This is only a 5-day-old video. Why didn't he bring up 4? Don't tell me he one of those things that 4 actually improved on the original. Then again, since he's only talking about the original Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, maybe he's just not kind of a remake of 4. By the way, we're going to be doing a different Resident Evil video about Resident Evil 4 in the future. Apparently, we turned into a Resident Evil channel now. Either way, let's go.
Pretty much perfect, arguably superior to the original in every way.
Alright,
RE4 remake is great.
This guy's good.
Though it goofs on a few narrative elements that were near and dear to my heart. But in
the Resident Evil 4 remake is not great. I mean, it's a great game, but it's not actually a good Resident Evil 4 remake. And frankly, I mean, yes, there's the narrative issues. He got that, but there's so much more wrong with it than that. Peep my old Resident Evil 4 remake review that came out like a couple years ago if you're curious about that.
In terms of Raccoon City, you know, fighting zombies and using the supplies we can fish off the bodies of dead cops and mercenaries, I don't think anything hits the mark quite like the original Resident Evil trilogy manages to. There's a unique kind of simulated sense of survival horror that at times becomes too cinematically focused in the remakes, sometimes to the point of completely losing the script altogether. I'm mostly...
You know what? No, I don't think he's wrong here. Like, that might be part of the thing that makes the original games so great. And frankly, actually even better than Resident Evil 4 in that regard. It is very cinematic in its gameplay, not necessarily in the actual cinematics. Like, you feel like you are playing a movie where you're in control the entire time. Cutscenes are rare. When they happen, they're brief. Everything you do is realistic. There's no, or at least realistic to a certain extent. It's not like Resident Evil 4 where, like, you kill dudes, they drop money, and you pick it up and purchase stuff at a vendor. Those are very video gamey elements. Whereas in Resident Evil, you know, the original games, 1, 2, and 3, those sort of, like, video game isms aren't there. So, yeah, I think that the cinematic nature of the remakes, I've never really thought about that before, but I think he makes a good point.
I'm just disappointed at how little they did with the remakes. You know, in terms of expanding upon the foundation of the originals. There was plenty of space to add cool new environments on top of the existing framework without actually changing or removing stuff, yet that's the route they took. Rather than having more time in Raccoon City, it nearly removes all of it from both games.
Yes, it does.
When it comes to recapturing the essence of RE2 and RE3, the remakes felt more like impressive tech demos than fully realized experiences. I never in my wildest dreams could have ever imagined they'd make the remakes feel smaller than the original PS1 games.
And therein lies the problem with Resident Evil 2 Remake to a lesser extent, but still there. Absolutely Resident Evil 3 Remake. How are you going to make a game, remake a game that came out in 1998, 1999 for the PlayStation 1, and it be a shorter, smaller game with less content? Like, that is, and the problem is, I don't think that most gamers of the modern era even know that that's the case, because they're not going to go back to these old games because they don't like tank controls or they don't like the bad graphics. But yeah, I mean, these are objectively bad from a narrative perspective, from a gameplay perspective, for this reason alone. There's more reasons, but he hits the nail on the head and we ain't even 2 minutes in.
Believe it's because they were remaking them for the wrong reasons. Not to improve the games or to actually update them for modern audiences, but to combat modders and independent game designers from doing it themselves, stealing what could have been a possible revenue stream for Capcom. I'm not saying the remakes were phoned in by any stretch, but it does feel like
Resident Evil 3 was absolutely phoned in
quickly to capitalize on what modders were doing in their spare time.
See, look at that.
Now,
that was obviously a fan-done Resident Evil 2 remake with the Resident Evil 4 engine, Resident Evil 4 camera angles, which I still wouldn't have wanted. I still would have wanted legit old-school fixed camera angles with modern graphics, but I would take that over what we ended up getting, for sure.
Easy for most people to assume that I'm primarily talking about RE3 Remake. And if you're familiar with the Resident Evil franchise, then to some extent, you're right about that. But I'm talking about Resident Evil 2 Remake as well.
Good.
Both
Good.
of these
2
remakes
gets too
have
much of a
sort
pass.
a fatal flaw in their execution, and it makes me wonder at times what it is that modern developers have against letting players just make their own decisions, letting them experience things on their own terms, at their own pace, or just facing the harsh reality of their choices in general. On some level, the remakes do majorly incorporate the basic survival horror design. You get things like health items, weapons, ammunition for those weapons, and you use them as intelligently as possible to try to make your way through adversity. But where I find the remakes miss the mark is in how they seem to forget that player choice is more than what bullets you use or how many healing items you consume. It's also about which
player choice in these classic survival horror games. This isn't just Resident Evil, by the way. This is Silent Hill. This is even to an extent things like BioShock. It's about, is it better to use ammo than, or is it better just to try and sneak around the enemy because there's, limited drops in the game. There's a finite amount of ammo in these games. With Resident Evil, you've got multiple branching paths, and you want to see if, okay, should I go through, I've got this key that unlocks, multiple different doors. What door do I want to go through first? What's the most optimal route to avoid the most amount of backtracking? Or is there a way that I can, maybe it'll take me longer, but I can get around the enemies so that I don't have to use the ammo on them. There's elements of player choice in the speedrun aspect, or times oh, do you want to kill Barry or do you want to trust him given the gun? Can you get to Rebecca fast enough, or are you going for the speed run so you're just gonna let Rebecca die? Things to that effect. So yeah, I think also with Resident Evil 2, you've got the A and B scenarios. Leon A, Claire B for the first run, then Claire A, Leon B for the second. You have to beat both, and then you only get the true ending. I think Resident Evil 3 has the instantaneous choice methods. You've got a split second to make certain decisions. It will affect the entire outcome of the game. So yeah, none of these elements are in the remakes.
Paths you take. While there is some extent of this in the remake, I think it's fair to say that they're both much more streamlined than their PS1 counterparts. Many of the divergent paths in RE2 and RE3 are straight up missing from the remakes, with the later game's entire foundation being essentially scrapped for a linear sequence of forced obstacles and encounters. But I'll start with the RE2 remake to keep things clear. One of the first and most glaring differences between RE2 and its remake is that the entire Raccoon City portion is more or less missing.
Correct.
In the original, you had to trek through the Raccoon City streets as either Leon or Claire to reach the police station. And it's really interesting how difficult and off-putting this section of the game can be to new players, many of which started with RE2 and had just skipped RE1 altogether.
This is also
It's an
true.
absurdly difficult start to the game that requires you to know essentially all the controls and how
even a veteran like your boy here who's beaten this game God knows how many times often gets bit in that very first opening moment. Like, when you start, when Resident Evil 2 starts, you are immediately surrounded by 3 zombies, and you can immediately whip out the blicky and try and gun some down, or you can try and run around them. And because your boy doesn't want to waste ammo so early in the game, I always try and run around him, and usually I get nicked at least once. Like, it literally just drops you in and says, figure it out, bitch. And I love it. It's good. It gets the adrenaline going. It teaches you a lot in just the first few frames. It teaches you the concept of dodging enemies, just being good enough at the controls. It teaches you, hey, do you want to make the decision of using the ammo? It shows you how high stakes the game is going to be. Death is around every corner. Like, it is such a teachable moment within the first 5 seconds of gameplay. All completely gone in the remake.
Carefully maneuver around enemies, or you die within the first 10 to 12 seconds. And this may even seem like bad game design, but it's actually genius. The whole point of this ghoulishly difficult Raccoon City section is to illustrate how unsurvivable it is to stay outside on the streets.
There's that too from a narrative perspective,
the chaos of this viral epidemic cannot be brute forced with bullets or muscle. It's a show versus tell situation where instead of suggesting that the streets are uninhabitable, it shows you firsthand the crowds of undead and how dire the entire situation has become. On your first playthroughs, fighting these hordes is next to impossible, and it's quite a trial for first-timers to even get to the police station. And it creates what I think is the best bait and switch in the entire series, something they perhaps wanted to do with RE1 but didn't have the technology yet. The entire premise of it is that there's this false sense of sanctuary once you reach the police station, but that illusion is quickly lifted once you see Marvin bleeding to death on the ground, once you see the silent liquor crawl past the window.
Oh man, that
you realize
chills.
that the RPD is a whole other monster, and that you'll find no sanctuary here. In the original Resident Evil, this feels like what they were going for with the mansion. They even have that text crawl. You escaped into the mansion where you thought it was safe, yet. And this suggests to me that, on some level, Capcom enjoyed the theme of luring the player into a false sense of security from the outset of the series.
Well, I mean, because that's an effective way to do horror. Like, even horror films do this as well. That's why it can't just be, like, scary all the time. You need to, yeah, you can have your jump scare moments or whatnot, but what effective horror is you've got constant anxiety, but you're not really peaking, You're not really peaking. It's just like you're on edge, and you're feeling it, and you're feeling it. And then one of two things happens. Either at maximum anxiety moment, something happens that's, the jump scare or a big horrifying moment, or you let that anxiety linger for so long that you drop your guard and that you think that you are safe, and then the big horrifying moment happens. Like you can do one of those two. You gotta try to hit the apex of the anxiety, or let the anxiety fade into nothingness, and either one works, both of which I feel like are missing from these remakes. Again, Resident Evil 2 has it a bit, but Resident Evil 3, it almost does not exist outside of, like, maybe the scripted Nemesis fights, and that's more of a inside your head thing because it's just so big and foreboding and intimidating. But then you realize, oh, Nemesis in the PS1 version was far scarier and far more difficult to deal with, and it just becomes, again, like a video game instead of an anxiety-pounding trial to survive.
That entire narrative beat is missing. And even though there is a brief outdoor section in the first scenario, it's incredibly short. Like, painfully short. It takes less than 40 seconds to get to the RPD gate, if that. And the zombies themselves mostly don't aggro the player. Even then, they're only a threat if you stop holding down the run button for some reason.
Look at that!
Which you're unlikely
That
to
is
do.
that is terrible. He got to the RPD so quickly. That is, we're talking minutes of gameplay in the original. And again, there's actually a prequel section to Resident Evil 2 Remake that teaches you the controls and whatnot in a gas station. Like a little tutorial that's like, oh, there's 1 or 2 zombies in this gas station, so you know how to handle your gun, and you know fight or flight, and you know how to use key items. So even then, not only is this section so short, you've also lessened the impact because you gave a tutorial.
Sometimes I wonder if they did this to retain the threat of the zombies. However, they did add a gas station sequence that was only a cutscene in the original, so it's not like you don't know what you're up against.
But see, I think the gas station sequence makes it worse.
Sanctuary and the narrative implications of the zombie outbreak aren't really the only things lost by this omission in the remake. By removing all the meat from this section and shortening it dramatically, you also lose a lot of the cool gameplay paths that are expanded upon by what players decide to do before reaching the RPD.
Yeah, didn't they completely cut Brad?
And the
Zombie
ability
Brad.
to fight him if you reach the RPD without collecting any bullets. This is the obvious one, but it's not necessarily the important one. It's the choice to have Kendo's gun shop in this section and not later on in Leon's campaign that really makes the difference. In the original game, you can get Kendo's shotgun early by fighting off the hordes within his shop.
Yep.
Or by running up and grabbing it quickly before the zombies notice you, sometimes only taking a small bite in the process. Believe it or not, this is a game changer, and it can drastically affect how you proceed through the rest of the city or even the police station. When you get the card key from Marvin and unlock the east and west wing doors in the main hall, you can choose to go either way instead of being forced down one or the other. But it's typically suggested you want to go through the west hall door first and face the liquor right away. This is because the east location is absolutely packed with zombies. You have to come back here anyways, so it heavily pressures the player to come back later and forego any of the resources you may find on this side of the police station. But if you have the shotgun and you go in there early, this gives you access to all the resources and goodies in the East Wing before you even come in contact with the liquor.
Yup.
Obviously, in the remake, they drastically alter most of this so that it can be more streamlined, so having the shotgun early wouldn't make much of a
And again, this is another problem with the horror in Resident Evil 2, if you want to call it that. Because this is streamlined, because so much of this is done via cutscene, like pulling that cop out, and all of his guts are all hanging out, and he's only got half a body, I'm sorry, just adding the gore doesn't inherently make it more terrifying, especially in a cutscene where I'm not in control, so that it's like watching a movie. Like, there's a reason that horror games are, at least in my opinion, better than horror films, and that is because you are in control. We've all been watching a horror film and been like, oh man, don't go through that door, why are you guys splitting up, you're idiots. Like, they're making decisions that frankly are dumb that most people would never do in real life, so it's almost difficult to get invested into the horror. Whereas in a horror game, since you're the one in control, and because you have different options, different choices, if you fuck up, that's more on you than on any sort of bad character writing or bad narrative writing or anything to that effect, because this is maybe a decision you would have made were you in this situation, and if you die because of it, because you made the wrong decision, is that what would have happened in real life? I mean, again, just trying to make this game more cinematic and more epic. Sure, it looks pretty. I'm not going to deny, like, the visuals in Resident Evil 2 Remake are gorgeous, but they don't hit with the horror, and that, like, I'm sorry, if I'm playing a survival horror game, I want the feeling of anxiety and being scared. I don't want pretty cutscenes.
A difference in this case anyway. These early gameplay decisions heavily affect replayability, and to me, they're what Resident Evil is all about. It may seem insignificant considering it's just one specific change, but this particular omission kills what I felt like set the entire narrative tone of the game. Without that early Raccoon City gauntlet, there's simply no answer as to why Leon or Claire would choose to endure the small hell that is the RPD. As RE1 put it, it's too dangerous to go outside. Why would Leon or Claire choose to spend so much time in a police station if they just breezed through the streets and could find a more secure location or perhaps even an escape route? You don't just hurt replayability with this change, you hurt the entire logic of staying inside the RPD.
You know what? I've never considered that aspect. That's a really, really good point. Well, for all my gripes and moans about these remakes, that is an aspect I've never thought of. The beginning being, because I've always just thought about this like from the horror perspective and about what it does worse than the original. But like strictly from a narrative perspective, yeah, if it is so easy, why would they hunker down at the police station where now they're in these cramped quarters and zombies are everywhere and Mr. X is there? Like, clearly the zombies were slow and you were easily able to get around them in the city. This is well done, bravo.
Game takes place there, so in turn, you hurt the logic of the entire game. I also find it fascinating that with the new technology Capcom...
You could make the argument, I guess, to be fair, that Leon is a cop, it is his first day, So, like, he needs to report in, see what's going on. Like, hey, I need to be with my people. I need to get briefed on the situation. And that he didn't know that there was going to be zombies everywhere. All right, fair enough. So you can make the argument that he would at least go to the police station. You can make the same argument about Claire. Claire would think it's safe. They've got guns, weapons, you know, first aid, stuff like that. But then why stay in the police station? So the logic still goes out the window if you think about it for more than like, all right, well, now they know this place is fucked. Why stay? They've got a way out. The way out's the same way they came in. Obviously, there's like secret exits and shit like that as you get further in the game, but the characters don't know that. Finding that out's part of the narrative. So if they could just go back out the way they came and find somewhere else, yeah, why not? Leon's literally the last cop alive after Marvin Branagh dies. So what reason does he have to stick around?
Had with these remakes that they wouldn't choose to actually expand on the Raccoon City sequence for how much more visually stunning a set piece it could have been. Instead, they shy away from it, maybe due to how technically demanding it is compared to the PS1 static backgrounds, but even in the concept art, there was a lot more shown in the city sections, and it looked like potentially some of it got passed off to the B team when making the RE3 remake. I think in a way, a lot of us were rationalizing this in our head. At first, I remember saying to myself, well, maybe they wanted to maintain the slow tension for as long as possible in the A scenario and are saving the dramatic outdoor stuff for scenario B. And that would have made a lot of sense.
And then, here we go. The largest crux in the Resident Evil 2 remake playbook, the thing they get the most wrong.
From a pacing standpoint, it would have given the players
okay, maybe he's not going to go right
into
it yet.
Spectacle and simultaneously did away with the brutal skill barrier that made the original RE2's outdoor section so unforgiving. But no, the B scenario has literally no town section at all, even less than the first scenario. Well,
not only that, but the B scenario doesn't change when you play the characters in reverse. It's the exact same. Like, Leon A, Claire B playthrough 1 is non-canon. Claire A, Leon B is the canon playthrough, and because of that, the story changes. Elements change, routes change. You meet certain characters in one playthrough that you don't even meet in the other. Certain bosses in one playthrough that you don't fight in the other. All of that is gone here.
It was at this point that I did some more rationalizing. No matter how hurt I was, maybe they were saving all of this for the RE3 remake, which is a game that's primarily outside. And I thought it was cool that
hold
they
on.
add
Is
some
Homie,
remake, which is, no matter how hurt I was.
Homie using a mod to put her in this outfit, or is this? I don't recall. I'll be real. I only played through the RE3 remake twice. Like both. I got it day one, beat it that day, was super fucking disappointed. I played through it again just to see if my opinions would change like a few days later. I've not touched it since. So I don't remember if Jill's tube top was like an unlockable or whatnot. I know her Star's outfit was, but if Homie is using a mod to put her back in her original outfit, based. Super goddamn based. So if you ever see this, if that's what you're doing, I applaud you as a legit fan.
Maybe they were saving all of this for the RE3 remake, which is a game that's primarily outside. And I thought it was cool that they did actually add some stuff from the original intro into Claire's trek to the orphanage. But at that point, it was a tad too little too late, and it was just a bunch of dogs running around that I'm not sure captured the essence of the original or the narrative power of how dangerous the city had become. So for me and many people, RE3 was what we were all waiting for, and oh boy, we're in for a fucking double dose of eat shit from Capcom's B team.
I'm subbing, bro. I'm subbing. Like, anybody willing to go this hard? Up to this point, he hasn't really sworn that much or anything like that. Like, he hasn't been super hateful, but holy fucking shit, are we in a double dose? Like, okay. Alright, he about to go just scorched earth on Resident Evil 3 Remake, and I'm here for it, because for those of you that don't know, of the original trilogy, I get it, most people prefer Resident Evil 2, my favorite is Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Note the subtitle, Nemesis, which they completely dropped from the Resident Evil 3 Remake. Why? Because Nemesis isn't even really that big a point of the Resident Evil 3 Remake, they may as well drop the Nemesis subtitle. So yeah, for my personal favorite of the classic RE trilogy to get done this dirty, I got some shit to work through. Help me cope, brother.
It's amazing to me that the RE3 remake managed to have all the same issues as the previous one, only dialed up to 11. And unlike the RE2 remake, it wasn't something that primarily affected the first portion of the game, but the entire game. It's sort of ironic that the original RE3 doubled down on player choice to the point where the game literally had a live selection screen.
This is such a great mechanic!
Choose your own adventure book. It's ironic because in the same way that the RE2 remake emphasizes linearity over player choice, the RE3 remake doubles down, except this time to make one of the most linear fucking games you'll ever play. The disappointment that I felt when RE3 Remake turned the entire uptown section of the original into a goddamn walking sim. Well, let's just say I didn't touch myself that night like I did after playing the RE2 Remake. It was at this point that I realized
Hold on, what was that? What was that?
After playing the RE2.
My face from Resident Evil 3 Remake cost the same as Resident Evil 4 Remake. Also, I want to point out, dude, they did Carlos so dirty. This is supposed to be his, like, Resident Evil 1 alternate outfit, and it does not look anything like Carlos should look like. Like, they did Carlos so goddamn dirty. That is the only thing Resident Evil 3 Remake, I will say, sort of got right, was Carlos looks pretty fucking good. That's, alright, you got the one-off side character. There's never been another game since, even though he absolutely deserves to be because Carlos is awesome. You got him, you upgraded his character design. Fucking whoopee.
Remake. It was at this point that I realized that the developers had forgotten that, at its core, the original Resident Evil games were a survival sim. It wasn't about aiming or cutscenes or anything like that. It was about item management, carefully choosing what targets you're going to spend resources taking out, and which paths to take to minimize how quickly you drain your total resource pool.
Correct!
Like I said, a very stylish survival sim. And interestingly enough, these types of games have become quite popular, especially with the zombie horror subgenre.
Again, my most looked forward to game that was announced at Summer Games Fest was in the Indie Showcase on Saturday, and it's called Ground Zero. What's Ground Zero? Literally a retro PS1 style horror game that is clearly heavily inspired by Resident Evil. And it was the best thing they showed off. Why? Because instead of these new modern Resident Evil games that miss the point of what Resident Evil is, which is another reason why I'm so worried about Resident Evil 9, aside from a myriad of other reasons, instead I'm looking to these things that know what Capcom used to be able to do, what Resident Evil used to be, and trying to get my fix with that. Like, it's kind of frustrating how Capcom has lost their magic with, I would argue, their flagship series. You can maybe argue your Monster Hunter or Street Fighter, but like, it's between those three, for sure.
Games like DayZ, Project Zomboid, and even Dead Island managed to create a more visceral survival atmosphere than the franchise that literally revolutionized it. Sometimes I wonder why the remakes adhered so closely to the originals in terms of scope, when they could have expanded the game to take place across the entirety of Raccoon City. Specifically RE3 Remake, which, in the original, I felt very much did its best to capture the feeling of being trapped alone in a huge town with zombies. The RE3 Remake adds so much linearity that it's practically a different genre even. The remakes are still great to play, but overall, they're much less interesting to replay because it's mostly just more of the same.
Well, and again, I don't know if he's going to get into it now. I know he's got 10 minutes left. They also make narrative decisions that screw with the lore and screw with the canon. Every narrative decision they make that is a change for the worse. Having Ada show up and pretend to be FBI instead of looking for her boyfriend, which, if you play the Resident Evil 2, or the Resident Evil 1 remake, there's an Easter egg in there. Oh, you find the computer of a researcher, and the password is his girlfriend. What's his girlfriend's name? Ada. So you get Resident Evil 2, and lo and behold, what happens? Oh, there's this girl. She's looking for her boyfriend. Ada. Wait a second. Is it Ada? She was mentioned in the first game. She's never been there, but then there's the twist. She was never actually dating. I mean, she was dating him, but she was a spy. She was dating this umbrella guy just to get secrets and whatnot. And now that whole subplot's gone from Resident Evil 2. So what's the point of all that Ada stuff being in Resident Evil 1? Did she ever even still date this researcher? Was she still doing spy shit? That's gone. The Resident Evil 3 makes so many lore-breaking narrative decisions that don't tie into any further Resident Evil games, distract from Resident Evil 5, things to that effect, distract from the Resident Evil films, which are canon, like the CGI ones, that is. At what point, so are these reimaginings an alternate timeline? Did they replace the originals and they are now canon? So does it go Resident Evil Remake from 2002, Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil 4 Remake, wait, then back into Resident Evil 5, which now does also has some stuff that contradicts with Resident Evil 4, and it is an absolute mess, and I don't think Capcom has ever clarified it, or if they have, they've not done a good job, because an absolute fan like yourself here doesn't, or even if they have clarified it, it's like, okay, maybe these are non-canon and they're alternate universe. There's still such poor narrative adaptations of the originals. Why would I want to experience a worse written narrative version when I can just go back and play the originals? Again, modern gameplay and modern graphics do not justify changes to the lore, story, characters, overall atmosphere, survival elements, horror in general, things to that effect.
The style of progression and player choice is sorely lacking throughout. About the only thing that RE3 Remake did well, in my opinion, was how fucking cool it made Nemesis.
I disagree with that.
He lets Jill go too often and has opportunities to kill her and doesn't, but somehow I think this gives him more character. He wants to kill her clean, you know? Like fairly. Kind of like Predator. And speaking of like newly captured inspirations, does Nemesis in the remake remind anyone else?
Maybe that's what Capcom was going for, but once again, that doesn't make any sense. Nemesis is sent in to completely eradicate the surviving members of STARS so that Umbrella can 100% cover their tracks. To have Nemesis be like, oh, I want to make sure I give a fair fight like Predator, even if that was Capcom's intent, and I feel like Homeboy here is being way too charitable, that still goes against the lore of what Nemesis' purpose would be, what his programming is, how he was designed, what Umbrella's using him for, the whole nine. So, also, I do think his design's worse. Like, I think his design is objectively worse, which is wild because you've got all this modern detail, and you're telling me the PS1 model looks more terrifying? Now, to be fair, there's an argument to be made for the original model looking more terrifying because it's low poly, because it leaves so much up to the imagination. Frankly, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, the live-action Resident Evil Apocalypse movie did a better adaptation of Nemesis than the Resident Evil 3 remake.
Else of Doomsday from the Death of Superman comic? He's the nemesis of the main hero, wears a containment suit to hide his true monstrous form, and adapts to every situation and comes back stronger and stronger the more you put him down. Just something I noticed and thought was pretty interesting. Unfortunately, though, that's where the good ends with the RE3 remake. Nemesis doesn't kill Brad like he does in the original. Jill doesn't explore the city much whatsoever and is mostly herded into interiors after the first hour of the game, and about 45, maybe 50% of the game's original content from locations, bosses, and enemies completely cut. Just to illustrate how much was cut, there's no brainsucker enemies, no crows, no worms, no web spinners, no gravedigger boss, no...
The disrespect of cutting the Gravedigger, bro. Like, everyone talks about the clock tower, and don't get me wrong, I'm pissed about the clock tower as well. That's a solid chunk of the game. But the disrespect of fighting was effectively a zombie sandworm from Dune, or an evil zombie version of the Tremors beast in the like crowded, claustrophobic subway, or maybe the grave. Again, actually, you can fight him at different points of the game depending on the decisions you make. By the way, another thing Resident Evil 3, the original, did better. Where you even fight this boss is going to change depending on decisions you make. But bro, this could have been a terrifying enemy. Although maybe I'm glad that they cut him from the game, because maybe at least he didn't get the Nemesis treatment where he's just a nothing burger set piece now. Also, yeah, fuck them for cutting out the clock tower and just making it a something you see in the background as an Easter egg.
Clock tower location, no backtracking to Uptown, no Raccoon Park, no Nikolai helicopter boss, no kinky shirtless tentacle nemesis, no live selection, and no different endings. It's also worth mentioning that they do replace our kinky tentacle nemesis phase with something much, much less interesting and more generic. I like Carlos's change, I guess, but there's really not enough material there for me to really talk about.
Exactly. I said it all like in 30 seconds.
RE4 Remake had tons of backtracking and exploration, a game that was known for its divergence from the series for being linear and action-oriented. It's hilarious to me how backwards the remakes are in terms of capitalizing on their most...
Alright, homie glazing the RE4 remake too much. I ain't down with that, but whatever, to each their own. If you want actual good opinions on the Resident Evil 4 remakes, watch a boy's video.
Powerful elements. The entire script is flipped for no reason whatsoever. The entire village portion of RE4 Remake, before reaching the castle, drags on for ages now if you're a completionist, and yet it's not that interesting of an environment to explore, not from a visual or narrative perspective. Yet Raccoon City, the most interesting and narratively exploitable environment in the franchise, is now a brisk 1-hour cakewalk of completely linear paths that waste all the potential of the most iconic location in all of the zombie horror subgenre. Not to mention wasting the most iconic Resident Evil baddie and potentially the most recognizable villain in all zombie media. I've never felt more disappointed with a game than RE3 Remake.
Agreed!
I want to feel overwhelmed by the scale of it all.
I am not over-exaggerating. I'm pretty sure I said this on SNH a couple days ago. Resident Evil 3 might be... it's right up there with Kingdom Hearts 3 and the most disappointed I have ever been in a video game. Like, in my entire life, the most disappointing experiences with video games were Kingdom Hearts 3 and Resident Evil 3. And because I love Resident Evil way more than Kingdom Hearts, I would say that Resident Evil 3 was absolutely probably more disappointing. Honestly, I decide now. I've decided now. Resident Evil 3 more disappointing than Kingdom Hearts 3.
In the original, the game actually starts in the early morning after the police and UBCS try to contain the spread of the infection. And there's this haunting silence that overwhelms you. The only living person you even see after a while is Brad, who's surviving by the skin of his teeth, likely because of his skills as a STARS member. When he's killed by Nemesis, that feeling of isolation is altered into something even worse. You're beset with the knowledge.
Not having Nemesis kill Brad is, again, just it's a narrative game changer for the net negative. This scene was so pivotal in letting you know why the game was subtitled Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. You just saw what was the last surviving STARS member in town. Because remember, Barry and Chris, they've skipped town at this point. I think Rebecca has as well. It's just Jill and Brad left. And now Brad is gone because of this monster that is exclusively hunting STARS members. And he dies in a brutal fashion.
That the only other living thing in this city is a highly intelligent, militarized super mutant with heavy artillery that wants you dead. I don't think RE2 or RE3 Remake knows how to let the player take center stage for too long without shoving some cutscene or dialogue or atmosphere and immersion wrecking bullshit your way. It can't help itself. Even when you see the liquor scurry up the window in the RPD, Leon can't help himself but to say some cheesy ass shit like, "What the?"
What in the...
Compare that to the original where you get the vibe that Leon possibly didn't even see it, as he doesn't react whatsoever. This makes it feel like only the player caught it, only you caught it, and it's scarier that way.
I agree with this 100%.
Experience. Leon maybe didn't see it, but you did, and you have to be the one to prepare for it. When the character reacts to it, it sort of puts something between you and the threat, making you feel less afraid. Even the raw silence of that moment in the original is superior. It reminds me of the air screamer moment in the original Silent Hill, how after grabbing the map or whatever on the counter, you see the thing silently flapping its wings in the window behind you. The silence adds to it. But when you hear the loud snarl of the creature with the audible climbing sound and then Leon saying some shit like, "What the?" it just takes all the air and suspense out of the moment. The scare is gone. It over-sensation.
And see, I like these breaking it down like this because when I played through this for the first time, now I'm a Resident Evil fan. I played the second game a million times. I knew this moment was coming, so I wasn't scared. But I assumed I wasn't scared because I knew it was coming. But maybe if they had executed it properly like they did in the original, which is still, like, it doesn't scare me at this point or whatnot, but, like, it very much like, oh, shit, this part. Okay, all right. Mentally prepare for this. Make sure you got shotgun ammo, like, stuff like that. I just assumed that I wasn't fazed by it in the remake because I was desensitized to it because it is a remake. But no, he's right. It's completely the immersion breaking factor is there. That wall between you to the character to the event is there, and that might be a part of it. It might not just be because of my familiarity with the moment.
Rationalizes something that didn't need to be altered, and this lack of subtlety is something that a lot of games today have an issue with for some reason, specifically games like Silent Hill 2 Remake, for instance. And while I think
Still
the
refuse
Silent
to
Hill
play.
2 Remake is totally serviceable, it doesn't really hold a candle to the original in terms of
And
its
that's why I refuse
atmosphere.
to play it.
That's not to say the Silent Hill 2 Remake doesn't have atmosphere, because it absolutely has an incredible atmosphere. It just doesn't have the right one. It actually felt more like Silent Hill 1 or Silent Hill 3 than it did to me like, Silent Hill 2, which was less about outright visual hellishness and more about the smothering and sexual undertones of a very tortured soul. And if you know anything about that game or how it concludes, you know exactly why those specific tones are important. So yeah, I'll stick with the original for these games today. I mean, at least in terms of survival horror. The original Resident Evil games and Silent Hill 2, for instance, they're not even remotely outdated in any way besides graphics.
Exactly!
They hold up tremendously well.
Dude,
and they maintain a minimalistic
There's a reason these games are on GOG and they play just fine. I was streaming Resident Evil 3, the original, like a couple months ago. I got like the HD upscale version from GOG. It's great. I beat Resident Evil 2, I think, a couple times in the couple months ago that I bought it. 3 I haven't beaten again yet because I've only played it while streaming. But even so, like, it's, yeah, the gameplay-wise, everything holds up. And for people that just need good graphics or whatnot, they do not have an appreciation and even more importantly, a respect for the classics. And again, that lack of care and that lack of respect and that lack of understanding, that lack of your knowledge of gaming history, I actually think can impact the future of gaming, because these are the same people that are going to go on to make games in the future. Or again, people are going to only play modern games. Some of this stuff's going to get lost to history. It's honestly like fake fan, fake gamer mentality. I'm sorry, I can't appreciate it. Like I can't take it seriously.
style that goes a long
Call me
way
an
with the
elitist.
whole survival sim thing. The thing that they pioneered so long ago. It's hard growing up and watching everything you love get remade. In some ways, it's my favorite thing because I hate everything new and I like to relive the franchises that I grew up with, but at the same time, it's agonizing to watch new developers miss the entire point of what made things so special
Correct.
in the first place. In closing, the Resident Evil remakes are incredibly good games, especially compared to a lot of the shit pushed out today.
And this is what I've always maintained. Well, Resident Evil 2. 3, not so much. Resident Evil 2 Remake is a good game. It is, from a gameplay perspective, from a visual perspective, like the graphics, the sound design. It's a good game. It is a bad Resident Evil game. It is a bad Resident Evil 2 Remake. And considering it is a Resident Evil 2 Remake, I feel like those things should honestly take priority over it just working as a game in and of itself, because you cannot have a remake without having the original that will inevitably be compared to, because you need to have that original source, original reference to even do the remake. Now, Resident Evil 3 is a different story. That's just straight up fucking bad game in general. Resident Evil 3 is not only a bad Resident Evil game and a bad Resident Evil 3 remake, it is just a straight up bad game. But again, that's neither here nor there.
I love them. They balance the survival horror genre and the modern over-the-shoulder action genre even better than the original RE4 did. But the problem, in my opinion,
Okay, he
is
is
somehow
very wrong
less
there.
charming, less imaginative, and more restrained in virtually every way. And sometimes the things that we love about the originals, the things that made them ingenious, is overlooked and left on the cutting room floor. Developers sometimes miss the importance of things when trying to recreate or improve upon the original formula. Remakes are simply at a disadvantage because of this. There's always something lost, and while it's true that there is usually something gained in the process, it puts you in an awkward position where there's stuff you like about the original and
Yeah, but what is gained is not necessarily a net positive just because it is gained. So, like, if you look at, if you started, baseline is 0, okay? And then you add 2, but then you take away 4, well, now what are you at? You're negative 2. When you add 1, that's a gain, but you're still at negative 1. So what is the gains in this? All right, better graphics, better sound design, I'm sorry, at least the way that I rate games, the way that I feel like what I value in a game, those are not very high on the list of what makes an overall game good. Remake or not, Resident Evil or not, like those just are not high on my list. I will play games with shitty graphics or shitty sound design or whatever if the story is great, if the gameplay is great, if the character is great, things of that nature. So yeah, I mean, just because you gained better graphics and you gained better sound design, better audio mixing, things of that effect, doesn't mean you're still at a net positive. If anything, again, by my estimation, you're actually at a net negative even with the gains.
And the stuff you like about the remake. And to get the full experience, you kind of have to play both. I find this to be less the case with the RE1 remake because of how closely it adhered to the original.
Exactly.
And I think that's why comparisons like this matter, because it truly feels like remakes can be done better than they are. At least right now. They're becoming a common occurrence in pretty much all media formats, from movies, games, and even music. The only thing that changed in the RE1 remake is a bit of the specific enemy layout and the revision of the retro 80s horror vibe that was changed in some...
Well, 70% of the game is the same, which is 100% of the original game pretty much, plus with an added 30%. They added certain new enemies. They added, Lisa Trevor. They added an entire new subplot with Lisa Trevor. They added the Wesker survival. Because technically you know about that from Code Veronica, but it's never really shown or anything. There's so much. They added new puzzles for the new locations that weren't in the original. So yes, this is 100% a case of not only was everything there, and they gave us more.
Something much more realistically disturbing. However, the change was blended so well and is still maintained throughout the remakes, it's often seen as an upgrade to what was a dated and kind of niche grindhouse tone.
Correct.
It can also be said for the RE1 remake that it didn't cut anything, and it only added things to the experience, which was a major gripe people had with the other remakes, myself included. Even the RE4 remake removes things, but the only difference is that RE4's update adds so much to the experience that it can kind of easily be forgiven, and much less is omitted in general. So in my opinion, though the remakes are great and do a fairly excellent job, you're still better off playing the original games, as they're much more expansive.
He's too charitable, honestly. It's a great video, but he's still charitable.
Hell, even the RE4 remake is a slosh to replay because it's like 7 hours longer than the original. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess, depends on how much free time you're willing, to spend replaying something. But anyways, thanks for watching, and subscribe if you like this kind of content, as I'm going to be focusing more on this and streaming for a little while. Don't ask me about dinosaurs in the comments unless you want me to jump through the screen and smack you. So long, and enjoy hyperreality. Bye.
Yeah, that was an excellent video, excellent breakdown of why. And again, I feel like the people that glaze these games, the Resident Evil 2, 3, and even to an extent 4 remakes, either A, didn't play the originals, or B, if they played them, they were not fans of them, and they needed this new modern style of gameplay and this new modern style of storytelling to become fans. And you know what? If that's the case, fair enough for you for enjoying the game, but then you're not an actual fan, because the core essence of what was in these originals is no longer a part of the remake. So they're not even really Resident Evil. They're Resident Evil in name only. It's a shitty situation to be in, because when you got Resident Evil 7, yeah, it was jarring and different, but in a lot of ways did feel like a return to form in a way. You had puzzles, you had the more slow, eerie moments, it wasn't action heavy. Now, you had negatives like Ethan having no fucking character. Some people had an issue with it being first person, which I completely understand why. But at least 7 felt like it was definitely trying to take us back to what Resident Evil was in the 90s. And then 8 took all the wrong lessons from 7, and once again, we've got a good game, but a bad Resident Evil game. Yeah, no wonder I'm a little bit nervous about Resident Evil 9, especially when the trailer looks like it's just heavily reliant on member berries. So, yeah, all in all, this is a fantastic video. Definitely, I'll leave the link in the description. Drop the boy's sub, check out his other content. I probably will do so as well. And, yeah, we'll probably be doing a lot more content like this alongside the news coverage going forward, just because I'm finding it fun. So, yeah, these are my opinions. Let me know yours in the comments down below, or let me know on X, or find me at Bolt the Word. And please do subscribe. I'm a nerdy news channel. I cover nerdy news nearly every day. Not always video reactions about Resident Evil, but anime, movies, music, Magic the Gathering, you name it. Check me out on Instagram at wordsofparadise_Leon and become a member for $4.99 a month. You can join the Discord, choose the articles we go over on a day-to-day basis, choose the videos we react to on Friday night live streams, and of course, get involved with over 200 now vital idols. We are a bright, beautiful, glowing, vibrant community that I cannot wait to grow even further, because we do care about diversity. Only one kind of diversity of thought. If that's interesting to you, join the Discord, hit subscribe, and until next time, it's all here in the Nerdosphere. This has been Words of Paradise.